We are also recording it.
Cool. I'm sorry, I should do that earlier. So if we look at this component render here, we can see the SVGs are multiple components, and you can see each one here. And while the other online free library called Recharts, oops, sorry, Zoom is blocking me. It's just one component called Canvas. So, and there is an article I'll post later, does some performance comparison, like in terms of recommendation of which type of technology would be the best use. And we can see, even though sometimes SVG is not recommended, but the performance is much better than Canvas and other technologies. And if you do complex animation, because we used Chart.js before, you can really hit a memory issue on mobile phones if it's a relatively lower version of iPhone, or the phone doesn't have enough memory left. So it could cause some issue. So personally, I like SVG technology.
And yeah, if just a slight diversion, if Faye could switch back to a sample chat in Charts.js, and if you open you can hover over any element you like. You can debug and inspect it, and accessibility of each element that you build in your chart is much better than for WebGL, where you just cannot see any of that. You cannot debug it this way, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Let's start talking about what we are going to use today. So the tool we are going to use today is an online IDE called StackBlitz. Okay, this is not a commercial, it's just a good online IDE that we can use to create React or Angular project easily online without needing to set up an environment on our computer or do complex NPM install. So basically you can just click on, so in my case, I always click on this one, TypeScript. You can just simply click on it. You will screen a new create React app. And we can just start code React really simple.
For anyone who is not aware of what TypeScript is, it's a superset of JavaScript, and it's not a big deal in the current workshop. We're not going to use much of the TypeScript features, but we strongly believe that TypeScript is the future of the JavaScript so far as it looks for the next 5 years. So it makes sense to invest just a little bit extra time to expand your knowledge of TypeScript. So sorry that it's TypeScript, but not really that sorry.
Cool. And if you open the link that I posted on top of this Zoom chat and also posted on the Meetup comments, this is the one I opened. It's called Data Visualization with React Workshop Base. So today I'll work on this base project and gradually save. So you can always visit this URL to see my progress as well as like visit on see it on Zoom. Advantage of using StackBlitz over Code Sandbox.
Yeah.
Well, we did try both. Code Sandbox is another online IDE, which is really popular too. But we did have some performance problem during our previous workshops, and StackBlitz is relatively stable for us.
I think that one of the problems was something to do with the browsers, and I'm a Firefox user, and I had some trouble with it in the past. I think they fixed it. The features differ very slightly as far as I remember, so there's barely any difference. I think there was like something like live sharing, some feature in StackBlitz that were extra that was nice to have, and a different level of integration with GitHub, where you can do commits right from your browser. And I think that these two these two IDs, that was the real difference. That's about it. Everything else is practically the same because they use I think the same engine under the hood that Microsoft used in Visual Studio Code.
Cool.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. So I believe Code Sandbox uses the service worker, so you could run it offline. I don't know if the StackBlitz does that already.
I think StackBlitz is asking you to install it. That means that probably they already built in some offline mode. Yeah, but I have a suspicion that Microsoft will release something free and available that looks exactly like their Visual Studio Code version, and it will just tramp the use of these two IDEs, which is slightly maybe unfortunate because it's such a small niche funny market. And
yeah, cool. Okay, so let's start on our charts. So I created some Figma design. Today we are going to create like exactly same visual charts as I designed, and later on I'll send this prototype to everyone so you can go through and have a look at the designs while you do your home exercise. And today we are not just going to cover the tech part. We'll also talk a little bit about like which type of chart would we choose for which types of visualization. So let's start. So today we are just going to create like simple data visualization, which you see is like cliche rainfall and temperature data here. And we'll start by creating a bar chart, which is a very clear and very simple type of data visualization, which I quite like. It's really good for bucket or volume-based data visualization. In this case, if we separate each month as a bucket way of looking at rainfall data, so bar chart is really good, and we can really clearly see which months have higher rainfall last year and which months have lower. And this data is coming from BOM. Basically, I put some data from BOM Australia and got this data here. So now I'll introduce a little bit about what's the parts of this chart. So you can see here is a white card typical type of design. And I already coded the style of the white background card. And also the heading will be just a HTML heading. It can be element outside of the chart. And the rest of the part is the chart. So visually we can see there are actually 4 parts that composes this chart. And we can see an x-axis, which are the months, and a y-axis, which are the rainfall volume, and the bars, which is like later on when we code is one component to put all the bars on. And there's another component that's not easy to observe, but it is the grid behind the bars. And the name is Cartesian grid. I hope I pronounced it correctly. And there's a 5th component, which is not visibly seen here, is when we hover over, we want to see the detailed information of the bar. And same as on mobile, when we click on it, we want to see the information of each bar popping up. And that component is called tooltip. And to create this chart, we will add this file component in and gradually see these show up. So now I'll go back to the IDE. So let me close this one. So the first one, if we look at index, I already stacked all these cards there. It is for easier for today. So we don't need to worry about all the other React components, and already put it the sequence here. So the first one, we look at the rainfall bar chart. And to make it easier, I also did all the inputs. So when you do at home, you can use the other exercise project, which will be exactly the same as what you see now. But when you do your own project, please don't forget to import or things won't work. Cool. And let's start on this bar chart. So
the first one is rainfall bar chart. Cool. Now let's all navigate to that file. Yep.
Yeah. So if you would like to try to follow me, you can go to the file. And if you just want to just watch the demo today, feel free to just watch the demo today. So we can see here is a dummy Dave says develop the chart here. So
yeah.
basically I'll do is remove that. So in Recharts, it defined bar chart as one big component, as one big container component for Recharts to figure out what the component we tell us inside supposed to do. Underline is using context. This is another like React concept. We can talk about it in other React workshop in the future. In this one, we're just going to start coding, use this component. So first of all, I'll put in.
Just a side note for someone who is not too familiar with React, each component is usually just a function that returns some kind of its own internal content, like other components or text. So yeah. Don't be afraid of creating your own components.
Yeah. So here for this bar chart container, we need to put in the data for this bar chart. So in this case, the data I imported is from the folder called data, and it is the monthly rainfall data. So I created a simple object with different years here, and the array of each month's rainfall data in simple number format.
Yep. Faye, there's a question on, yeah, sorry to ask, how do we follow along? Is there a GitHub repo?
So this is, just follow this URL.
Okay, so yes, URL, Faye posted it in the comment to the meetup. If you go to the meetup, you find the URL, you open it, and you can start editing right away. It will create your own copy of the thing automatically, so you don't have to be afraid of breaking anything. It will be your own personal copy. If you want to, yes, thank you, Kelly. If you want to if you missed something and you want to jump straight to the version that Faye is currently developing, you can click on the link again, and it will lead you to another copy that's up to date with whatever we currently developed during the workshop.
Cool.
No installation of Node or anything else is required. Just go to your browser, click the link. All right, so you please track whatever component we are at now. We are at rainfall bar chart.tsx.
Yeah.
Navigate there and let's start editing it. Yep. Thanks, Faye.
Cool. Yeah, no worries. So we put this in. Obviously, nothing's showing. And then we see this pretty red line here. This is TypeScript trying to help us figure out what attribute we put in is not typed correctly. So in this case, it's just a third-party tool that created the type. Third-party created the TypeScript definitions didn't complete the type definition, but this one actually works. But I'll delete it now to get rid of the red line. I'll explain that later. So as I mentioned before, we want to plot the axis to guide us to plot the graph. So let's do the x-axis first. So the component is simply called x-axis. And we can see nicely x-axis showed up, but is just showing 0 to 11 currently doesn't make much sense. And let's also plot a y-axis, pretty empty here. And let's also now just put in the bar component. You can see there's warning show up, ask us to provide the data key. So if we look at the data, we can see the data key, the key that actually contains the value of the rainfall is called rainfall. So I'll copy this one and put in data key, which is rainfall. Okay, now we can see both y-axis and the bars are showing up. Now let's put in the background grading. So the component is called Cartesian grid. So all these component names are, I think, beautiful named to its meaning. So we can already get the chart and it's showing rainfall data. But first of all, it's not really pretty. You see these black bars here. And also the alignment is not pretty and information doesn't say anything. We just see boring 0 to 60s and 0 to 11. We know in real life we need to put in the data that makes sense to our users. And let's look at our design. So first of all, let's look at x-axis. It's actually
we're gonna, sorry, Faye. There's a question, how do we change the units on axes? And we're gonna do that in a moment.
Going to that. Yeah, sorry. So currently we are seeing 0 to 11. So we want to map to the actual months display. So it's not showing all the data. So in the data, it's just 1 to 12, which doesn't make sense. And then there is an attribute called take formatter. So first of all, we need to map it to at least the months. We need to let x-axis know it's showing it, which month it is. So if we put in the data key as months, we can see now it mapped to month 1 to month 12. But also this is not what we wanted. We want to show the actual name. So there is another prop called take formatter. So take formatter is a callback function that can take the value from the keys. In this case is 1 to 12. And you can write your own customized function. In this case, I wrote a really simple function, kind of like a hacky simple function, and mapped number 1 to 12 to actual the name of the months. But there are better ways to do that. We can discuss that later. So let me remove this noise. And if we compare with the design, we can see we get rid of the little lines there because it's kind of like a visual noise. Let's get rid of that. And it's a property called take line. And we just need to set the value to false. And then we got rid of take line. So now let's also format the y-axis a little bit. So we want the actual unit show up because when there's no unit, we don't know what does 60 mean, what does 45 mean. We want our data to be more meaningful. So we need to add the unit here. Yeah, so now the data makes much more sense. And this is where I decided to put in a smaller font size, just for them to look a little bit nicer and also look exactly the same as the design. And also compare with the design. On the design, there's no these also like noisy lines because it's aligned with the grade. I don't think there's any point to draw these lines. So there are some actual props we can use to configure the styling. So in this case, I made the y-axis contain less space and also removed the straight line, the straight black line next to it, and also remove the tick lines, just like what I did for the x-axis. And we can also make the background Cartesian grid look exactly the same. So we can turn off the vertical lines. So the same if you want to take remove horizontal lines, just change horizontal to false. And also let's change to a much more subtle color and make it nicely dashed and more subtle. So there's another prop called stroke dash array, basically saying it's a 3 pixel long dash and 3 pixel long gap, and it will repeat this way. And now the x-axis, y-axis, and the grid look exactly like the design. And then for the bars, we need to, let's fill it to this nice color. So there's a prop called fill, which is exact prop name as SVG pass. And now we got ourselves the nice chart that looks like it is designed here. And if we zoom into that ways, is fully responsive, all thanks to this container that Recharts created called responsive container. It will make whatever inside responsive to the container size. Cool. And as I said before, there is a secret fifth component. So when we hover, it's currently not showing anything, and we want more information to show up. So that component is called tooltip. So if we add tooltip in, we can see the default style of React tooltip, which actually doesn't look very visually appealing to me. So there are some critical things missing. First of all, it's again showing month 5, and also the rainfall is in lowercase, which doesn't make sense. And also the value doesn't have a unit number. So we need to add the formatter in, which is the same as the tick formatter for the x-axis. But in this case, because it's a label, it's called label formatter. But we can use the same function to format the months. Now the month is showing up. And also, we want the unit number to show up.
Is everyone able to follow it with the same speed? Or anyone has some questions in between? No? Feel free to unmute yourself if you just want to say words.
Okay, let's continue. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, looks like the message says, all right. Okay. So when we actually add more information to the bars, the tooltip will actually show better information for the bars. So that's when we need to specify more detail for the bar. So first of all, the unit for the bars also supposed to be milliliter. And also the name, we need to name the bars. So here we just specify it's using the data key, which is a JavaScript K name. It's not like human friendly. And in this case, we can give the bar actually a name for the tooltip to identify what it should show, what is actually the data.
Sorry to cut you short. I was wondering why we're calling the getments name by order as well in the tooltip. Sorry, I missed, probably you said that in the label formatter. So why are we calling that function? And can we briefly have a look at the function?
Sorry. So are you talking about the label formatter?
Yes, I'm talking about the label formatter. I was wondering why we're calling that function and what the function does to the label formatter.
didn't quite get it. So that's because I think, first of all, the data actually didn't give us how to display the data here.
So I guess it's a simple function that accepts one parameter and tries to convert the value to some textual representation of it. So January is month number 1. Then you go to a lookup table and just find the name of the month in the table and return this actual user-friendly version of that value.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I get it. So you just getting that order number, then -1, so it will be like a 0 index, and
Yep.
then months and return the string. Yeah.
Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. So now, as we added more information to the bars, now when we hover over the bars, we are seeing clearer information for the bars too. But so as I'm a little bit OCD, I also don't like the gray highlight and also the squared display of the tooltip as well. So before this workshop, I created a function to actually format it a little bit better. So there is a property called content style, which we can use to format this tooltip. Actually, this tooltip is no magic. It's actually just a HTML got positioned by Recharts over this SVG when you hover over. And now is obeying the style I specified. Looks much better to my taste. And you can change it to any style you like. And feel free to read the Recharts documentation to style a little bit better. So if we look at this style.
Excuse my tiny interruption, Faye.
Yeah.
Bar chart component seems to not have the property called font size.
Yes, it is because it is not defined. But it is actually in the documentation somewhere.
So that means that the authors of the library did not write a complete TypeScript representation. So it kind of says there's nothing, but we know that there's stuff because it's not in the TypeScript version, but it's in the JavaScript version that this property supposedly exists. And yeah, that happens to some libraries that have TypeScript definitions that are incorrect or missing. Yeah, that happens. So the thing here, yeah, I think there's a way to either ignore it or to write an extension for the library to improve the typing yourself, or commit a git commit to repo called definitely typed, which contains all of the type definitions for all the libraries so far on the web.
So we can remove it if we want. It's just not as pretty. Yeah. Cool. So as we were talking about the styling, so styling is just a CSS in JS I created. So it is just CSS in JS styles. So no magic here. Cool. And we'll use this style for all the other charts tooltips. And also to get rid of that gray background, there's actually a secret prop called cursor. And if we turn off cursor, it will stop the gray background showing up, basically saying there's no cursor style. So I think this looks very nice and neat to me. So, but feel free to customize the styles of your chart by yourself and don't have to follow the styles defined by me. Cool. We got ourselves a completed monthly rainfall data that look the same as our design. And so if someone else designed this, I say that person would be happy. But in this case, it's me. I think it's look exactly the same. Cool. And now we got ourselves a bar chart. And let's, everyone happy about this? Yeah, cool. And now move along. When we plot rainfall, we often talk about temperature as well. So let's look at temperature and let's discuss why temperature is displayed differently here. So here I pre-plotted a temperature chart. We can see here it is actually a line chart. So because as I mentioned before, so rainfall is actually a volume. So usually that means a bucket is usually a good way. So it's a good representation of a volume. But temperature is just a data point. So when it's a point and we plot a bar, it doesn't visually make sense. So in this case, I think line chart makes much more sense. And also it's showing the trajectory between each month and seeing a smooth transition of the temperatures. And I choose the color red to represent temperature. So usually when we choose a color in our designs, the color usually can help the data visualization as well. Feel free to choose the ones that suit your own taste for each type of data you want to plot. Now let's go into this chart. So this one in here is called temperature line chart. So let me close these. So it's called temperature line chart. And if I scroll to position, is Melbourne 2019 monthly temperature. And so we can open actually the bar chart one as reference. So we can see it's the same file component here, except instead of bar chart, we're actually plotting line. So let's do this. Putting the line chart container here, and as we can see, only accept one component. Let's delete the noise, and let's put in the data. In this case, is temperature. So I pre-imported temperature. So if we go to the temperature file, it's following the same format, only the temperature is showing here notes instead of rainfall. And let's put in the same, let's put in the same axis and Cartesian grade component here. Cartesian grade, yeah, cool. And what's the difference here is instead of showing milliliter, let's show actual here. So now we can also see the y-axis is not showing up because we are missing the line component. Let's put in the line component. And same as before, we need to put in the data key for it to plot the actual data. Yeah, so after we put in the data key temperature as temperature, we can see this, well, not so pretty chart showing up. It is a blue line that's not smooth between the points. Sorry. And we can see it's really far on above the chart instead of so nicely scaled along this background. So there are a few things we need to configure. And we also, let's also put in the tooltip. So the tooltip can be exactly the same as before. So we can see with the previous chart, we can quickly plot line chart. So now let's do some simple changes to make it a little bit similar. Let's put in the color as red color, and let's put in the name and unit as we put it in for the bar chart as before. So now it looks a little bit nicer, but still lines are really like hard between each other. There's just straight lines connecting each dots. So what we can do, removing the sense. Yeah. So what we can do is we can smooth out this line. So in line chart,
completely sorry. Yeah.
Recharts define the type. So I'll explain this later. So it defines different types of chart. So this type actually defines interpolation for this chart. So they are kind of different ways of smooth the chart. So we can try.
Yeah, so sorry, Faye. Yeah, the question was actually, I think, about hiding data bits. So removing one of the months, for example, if I understand it correctly.
So hide a specific month?
Yeah, but I don't think there is a point, because if there are a lot of data points, doing it declaratively is insane, and you would rather have to filter it yourself. I think, yeah. What if there are like thousands of values and you just want to? I just don't. I can't imagine the API to do that using components. Yeah, makes sense to pre-filter data, fortunately or unfortunately.
Well, pre-filter data, or there are actually like complex functions inside these components. So if we go to Recharts documentation, there are actually more complex functions that you can help define where to draw the dots. Yeah, so feel free to go in and dig into these deep functions, but today we are trying to just cover the basics. And I think it would be nice to have them data-driven anyway, than manipulating the components. Cool. So as I was talking, the smooth lines over. So let's change the scale to make the smooth much better. So we can see here the chart always starts from 0. So it doesn't make sense for the bar chart because the volume always starts from 0. But when we look at this temperature, the temperature never goes below maybe 10. And it's a big waste of chart area here to draw the data people don't want to see. So here we actually need to change, configure the y-axis to auto scale to the range that makes sense to this data. So in Recharts, they created a prop called domain. So basically you specify the domain of the y-axis scale. So in this case, I specify to auto basically saying, okay, you make choice for me. And we can also see just change to 0 here to make it back to 0. And we can also do something crazy like 100 to make it doesn't make sense anymore. So, but it does give us flexibility to adjust the y-axis scale to the one we want. And especially when we plot multiple charts together, and we want the value to be specified as the same position, that could come in really handy. Cool, now we can see this nice smooth chart. And let me go back to these types. So these types actually helps define how we want to plot the trajectory between each points. So we can say before I tried monotone. So monotone actually goes through each point at exactly that position is drawn and smooth it over. And basis make it more smooth, but not necessarily go through the dots. And behind all these functions, there is actually a function called Bezier cubic. Is one type of curve interpolation. And also not exactly term is a way of smoothing over data between different data points. Is very common thing to use when we do data analysis or data science. And here, because we visualize it, it's becoming a kind of a curve interpolation. So we can see there are different types, showing an example of this array documentation here. So feel free to play with different types at home. So in this case, for this workshop, I'll switch it, switch back it over to monotone. It's a little bit different from the design, but I feel it's accurate representation of each data point, and also shows us is a smooth transition between the values. Cool. Now we got ourselves a nice temperature line chart. So now after we got this line chart, we know how to plot the smooth lines. And let's go back to our rainfall chart, see if we can improve it. So as I said before, we plotted into buckets, but the reality is, like, the reality of this world is nothing is actually buckets. We need to break out the ways of bucket thinking, and everything is actually a smooth transition. So in this case, an area chart is actually is a much better representation for than the bar chart. And also I use the gradient color here because I think a deeper color represents a higher volume, and a half transparent color represents the lower volume. Is a really nice representation of the rainfall. It's like aligned with the reality of things. So let's try plot this area chart for rainfall. So let me see, this one. And let's go to left side. It is called rainfall area chart. So in this case, we can see here's the area chart and same 5 components, and also a linear gradient definition to help us plot that background. In this case, I'll try to speed up this process because we did most of the data bit before. So let's put in the container and remove noise. It's not helpful. Let's put in the grade axis and let's plot the areas. So let's put in the area and using data key rainfall, and also the same props, name and unit. Oh, now we get this really not so pretty area chart here. And let's smooth the lines like we did for the temperature chart. But in this case, I think basis is much better because it shows a smooth transition between each month. It's a better representation of this volume. And we can see all these are no surprise, similar as before. And also now let's try to plot that gradient color. So for the gradient color, there's actually no magic from Recharts. Recharts directly uses SVG components to define the fill color. So if I just drop in my code here. So in SVG, to define a linear gradient color, we need to put in the definition inside this component called depths. And inside depths, we can define different values we can use inside the SVGs. And in this case, we are defining a linear gradient and give it an ID for the SVG to use it later. And here's the value here means, so along the x-axis is from 0 to 0, so it doesn't change. And along the y-axis, we are changing in the vertical direction, so from position 0 to position 1. So it actually specifies the direction of the stops. So here on the top, we're using a non-transparent color, and at the bottom, we use the same color with half transparency. So 88 is alpha in hex, meaning like this will translate to 127. Happy to talk about styles later, but here I'm not going to jump into the details. Let me just show everyone what it looks like. So if we put this field in a format, so before we just put in a hex code as the color. Now we fill in, actually using this format, URL and the ID of this linear gradient. So we can see it's smoothly taking this linear gradient color and field area. Cool. And so we can see on the top is the non-transparent color. It is the blue color I specified, and gradually becoming more transparent. And we can change the alpha to be actually maybe a lower value to make the gradient more obvious. So this value like started from 0, 0 to FF, just same as all the other RGB colors here. Cool. Now we got our rainfall data. Any questions about this? Oh, our tooltip, sorry. Let's put in tooltip as well. Yeah, so we'll hover over the chart, you can see the data point and volume. Any questions? Cool. Okay, let's continue. So let's jump back to the design. So we see when we plot rainfall and temperature data, usually, so for many countries, many areas, rainfall and temperature have very strong correlations. So in this case, we can, like with these charts, not next to each other, but we can still see, okay, it looks like the rainfall, when rainfall is a little bit higher, the temperature is a little bit lower. But how do we like make it clearer? So there's one way, is actually plotting the data together, so we can actually get a better visualization of both data together, so we can have a comparison. So we can see here, some new components popped up. First of all, this another y-axis here, and also two different charts plotting together. And also there is this component. In most of the chart libraries, they are called legends. And it's showing the blue color is the rainfall and the red color is the temperature. And let's look at how to plot this one. So in here, I actually named it rainfall temperature composed chart. So in Recharts, it names this kind of chart called composed charts. Basically, it's this kind of X, Y axis type of chart plotted together. So you can put lines, areas, and bars on it. Let's put in the container and put in some the components we created for previous chart and see how it goes. So same as what we had before. So this chart. Let me remove this. Let's copy from, see, this area chart. Let's put in everything from here to here. So we can see it's basically looking like really similar to the other area chart with some of the spacing issue. And so let's just work with it. And now let's try put in the temperature data. So first of all, in terms of data, I created a simple function to merge the rainfall data imported and the temperature data imported. So with both the rainfall key and the temperature key in the same data format. It's also, this is a quick hacky way of merging the data. Feel free to write more like sophisticated and functions to merge data together. So let me remove some noises here. Cool. And we can say here, the y-axis also automatically falls on the left. But see the design here, we actually have the other y-axis on the right. So let's try put in another y-axis and see what's going to happen. So let's change the unit number. So what happens here is actually nothing showed up. Orientation need to change to right. See, still nothing happens. So so don't worry, it is actually a dark magic. I'll explain later. So let's first of all continue to put in the other chart. So if we go to the line chart, let's copy over the line first. And let's put both components in. So we can see both components are in this chart. When we hover, we can see the nice tooltip showing up. And now let's align the y-axis value. So now we actually need to specify the y-axis we put it on the left is the y-axis for the rainfall data. And the y-axis we put on the right is the y-axis for the temperature data. Otherwise, when we put both of these here, Recharts can't actually figure out which y-axis should represent which data. So that's why it's clearly there is a confusion. So to help with that, we can actually give the axis an ID, and will help the axis ID to align with the graph ID. So if we use the same y-axis ID, here I just simply name it left. So we can also name it rainfall to make it more meaningful. And same to the temperature. So let's do y-axis ID for the temperature one. Oh, sorry, copy to the wrong position. Yeah. And here, if we copy this and change that to temperature, and also give this to the line chart. Let's see what happens. Yeah, so now we can see both y-axis are showing, and it is representing the value. And so for the temperature one, let's do the same thing we did before to make the scale right. Cool. Now we got both data in this chart. So here, how about this one? Okay. Sorry, I was reading the comments to make sure I didn't miss any message.
No, that's okay. It's fine.
Okay. So okay. So I think there's a little bit, like we can see that the temperature of the rainfall have a big space there. So as my OCD personality, I looked up and there's a way to style the items inside the tooltip. So each line here, so rainfall and temperature is called an item. It representing one item on this chart. And so we can style them. So here in this case, I just remove the padding that's predefined by Recharts. And here is the gap. So let me check if the gap is on my original design or not. If not, let's find a way to turn it off. Yeah, it is not. So let me try make it smoother. Give me a sec. So my orientation. Oh, okay. So I can't find immediately. So let's just continue to put in another component. So the other component I mentioned before is legend. So let's put in just a simple component called legend. And Recharts automatically gives us this style, specifies the blue color for rainfall and the red color for temperature. It is because the field color is here and it can automatically figure out. Cool. I will look into how to turn off the gap later. Now I just don't want to bore everyone. Okay, I got it. So it's actually something to do with x-axis and how to plot the x-axis. So the reason why Recharts made a gap here is for this chart to be compatible to bar chart. Because when we look at bar chart, there's actually more space for the axis to plot the bars in. But in this case, because we are not plotting bars, but Recharts doesn't know, so it's still leaving the space just in case we are plotting bar charts. So we can actually turn it off by giving another prop to the x-axis. It's called scale. So we're talking about this is scale on points. So now it's smart enough to know, okay, we are not plotting any bars here. So it's removing the gap between each data point. Cool.
Yeah, well, that's not really obvious if you don't know what it is.
Yes. So there is this ugly fact of any chart library. They kind of like have their own props, and different chart libraries might have different names for similar types of component. For example, this another chart library which is pretty cool. I can talk a little bit about later, but first of all, it's not like 100% free. So, and it's not React based, but it have really good visuals. It decides to use like different component names. So when we choose a library, we might have to look into how they name everything. And kind of how to learn some library specific props too. Cool. So, so after this long big component, we got the chart we wanted. Okay, so now we got all our rainfall and temperature chart I designed. And anyone have any question about this kind of graph? Anyone want a break, like 5 minutes break? Should I continue? Okay, let's continue. We're not too far from finishing, so cool. So now this another chart, which is the most up for debate type of chart there is. There are lots of interesting debates about pie chart, or in this case, you look at it is a donut chart right here. I feel this kind of chart have like really good utilities when it's plotting certain types of data, but it can also be a pain of saying like representing data. But let's try plot it. Like learning a technique is what we want to get out of this workshop, and I'll explain later why it might not be a good visualization tool for some data. Cool. Let's look at this chart. It's actually much simpler. First of all, we don't have the X, Y axis here. We only have like different arcs with one value on top of it. And here I just mocked up some fake data representing the age group or website visit. And if we look here, it's called website visit age group. It's just some fake data I created. So no magic here, very simple. And let's open the demographic pie chart component. Ignore this function above, I'll explain it later. So we can see this chart is quite simple. It's just a pie, tooltip, and that's it. So let's put in the container like what we did before. Apologize for the font 14 issue. Cool. And remove the other component. And let's put in the pie. So here's one thing slightly different. Sorry, wrong. Slightly different here. So you can see I didn't put in any data to the pie chart. Instead, here we actually need to put the data into the pie. And is company again. So data key is what we also need to specify is the percentage. And let's put in the tooltip for it first to be complete. And style reverser. Cool. So we got us an original pie chart. So the reason we put it here is because there are different types of pie charts or donut charts. You can actually plot like grains of charts. If we go to examples, we can see there are like multiple layers of pie charts. So it's better. So Recharts decided to assign the data actually to each pie instead of to the wrapper. I think there are, yeah. So it's just like they just made this decision. Even though I think from data point of view, they can potentially design that way, but I think this might be, they decided it's a more convenient way to design the pie chart data. So we just follow their standard. And let's plot it as a donut. So in the pie, we can actually tell it the radius of inside and outside for it to understand it can be a donut, and the inner radius is the white area, and the outer radius is the outer radius of this donut. So here I use 40 and 100, looks like a good ratio. And let's put in the basic stuff we need to put in. First of all, the name. I don't know why it's grayed out. And let's put in the unit. So here when we hover, we just sing 22, 24, and it's actually a percentage. So let's put in the unit as percent. So nothing changed, nothing changed. Don't worry, let's debug later. Yeah, so the reason why it's not showing is because it's tooltip. You need to know what it is plotting. So let me try something to see if we could fix the coloring. Well, much better. So no overall mesh with color. Something interesting happening. Ah, okay, it's telling me I'm missing some value, I think. So here, for the pie chart, there's also another magical attribute we need to put in. It's called name K. So you need to specify, because before we have axes, on the x-axis and the y-axis, we need to specify the data key for it to understand what data, what value it is plotting. So for the pie chart, because it's just on the pie, so it is using the prop name called name K to specify which name it should display. So in this case, if we look at the data, so it's actually need to show 18 to 24, 25 to 30, 34. So this is helping it to specify which one it should show up. And also data key name. So there's label we need to format. Sorry, let's talk about that later. So let's fill them in the nice, pretty color before. Sorry, I'm jumping between my choices. Apologize for being a little bit rough. So there's one way to actually change the color inside the arcs we plot. So in this case, it's just customizing. So instead of letting Recharts decide what should be inside this pie, we can give it a children for it to be managed by us. So we can plot it by our own cell component. So I'll just put in the code itself. So here is a customized function. So for each data point of this data, we actually map to a cell component. So we're just telling it, you draw this cell for me. And this key value is just what we normally use in React. We have to give it a key for each array. And we can change the fill color. So in this case, I'm trying to use it to fill color, to change the fill color. And I define an array of colors. So colors is also from constant folder. So I define some colors, and here we are just picking the colors by index. So we got this donut chart with the colors I picked. And now we want to also make the labels show up. I think this is complaining also because we didn't specify label for the pie. So here is where it's getting a little bit complicated. We are trying to plot the labels in the center of each pie, which is not a native function supported by Recharts. So here, just showing we can actually have customized functions. It's not behaving today. Sorry, see if this works. No. Okay. Customized functions to plot the labels. And once we put this label in, we can see it stopped complaining because it's just asking for this prop to be there. And let's also remove the ugly lines sticking out because the pie chart was assuming the labels are like outside of the pie. So it's plotting these straight lines sticking out. Let's turn that off. And I'll explain how we did the customized labels. Also, this red line that Recharts is complaining is also because the type definition is not defined well. So the label can actually accept a callback function, yet it's not defined in this TypeScript definition. That's why it's working, but got a red line. So this callback function is what I said I defined on the top. So basically it can take the values of each arc, so the details values of each arc, and you can use this metadata to define some custom component assigned to each arc. So in this case, CX, CY is the starting, like helping define the starting angle of each arc. So you can see it's actually just plotting this arc and another arc, and under the hood, this array need to know which angle it starts from and how far it plots. So these are the values that's pre-retracted by this array and recharts that can help us to write custom functions. In this case, I'm not going to jump into too much detail. So basically what I did is I'm plotting at 0.5 radius of this donut, and also 50% angle of this chart. So it finds a center and plots a centralized text here. So it is, so this is a relatively complicated function here. So I predefined it. Also, feel free to define your own style when you do your homework. Cool. Now we got this donut look like design. So what we need to do is to make the tooltip show correct data as well. So here we need to use some tooltip props to format the tooltip. So it also, just like other formatters, tooltip also accepts the prop called formatter. So it takes the value and the name of the pie chart or the pie, and we can format it the way we want. So in this case, if we change it to that formatter, we can see value at % and age with age name. So we can see now it says clearly in this age, here is a value. And also, we can also format, the format is even further by using label formatter. So previously, this looks the same. Age, I think it is. Yeah, so we don't actually need this one. Sorry. So the formatter actually can help format the tooltip value inside. Now we got clear information of this pie chart. So because we are actually running like slower than I scheduled, I'll just jump into how I feel about this donut chart. So as before, if we turn off the labels, and if we look at these areas, and even without tooltip, I think there's no way in my case to tell which area is bigger compared to these green ones, and also very hard to tell which one is bigger between those two orange ones. So it's, to my taste, it's not a clear data representation at all. It doesn't clearly show which one is bigger and which one is smaller. If we actually want to know which age group have better value, I wouldn't say this is a good comparison. But in some cases, I think when pie charts represent 1% value among all, I think is a relatively good representation. So when is, for example, you can see is filling more than 50% or less than 50%, is a relatively better representation than you actually plotting the shares of each value. Cool. So although if we look at the design, there's another bar chart here, but this is actually a home exercise I prepared for everyone to try plot this bar chart using what I said, what we covered about bar chart before, and some of the tooltip and some of the color plotting technique I mentioned before. And I'll leave the last chart as a homework for everyone to try at home. Is everyone happy about this?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, happy. Cool. So this basically finalized the demo section. Sorry, it stretched a little bit longer than I planned. Hope didn't bore everyone. And does anyone have any questions about what we covered today?
Just wanted to mention that there was a question if there is any repo, where it shows how you could split these components out in like dry manner, in the sense that not copy paste stuff, but I guess just correctly scaffold everything and put everything in its own place and make it reusable.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the person wants to find a good example of how structure code, but I don't know, it's a good question.
I think it makes total sense. So when there are obviously components that's used across multiple charts, what we should do as a good developer is component extracting. So if we go to the compose chart, which covers most of the components, so I'll list the ones I would actually extract. First of all, the linear gradient definition definitely should be extracted because it's exact same code between two different charts, and it can be extracted as one React component. And also the grade is shared between 4 different charts and potentially be shared with the other bar charts as well. So this is definitely worth extracting. And the x-axis is an interesting one. So from my point of view, only the format, like it's not actually much to extract because it kind of like shared between these 4 charts, but in reality is, first of all, it's just 2-3 props. And you might need to change this one, might need to change one along the project, depends on what you are plotting. So whether it is worth extracting is just based on how many monthly based chart are you going to plot for your project. I think same thing applies for y-axis. There are some shared props and some that can never be shared. So I think it is a balance of the layer of wrapping on top of Recharts, what we need to do, and like how much do we think we are like over replicating our work. And tooltip, I think tooltip is kind of like more worth sharing. At least we get the cursor and content style, item style aligned between each charts, and we can make every charts look similar, but there have to be some custom values for each prop, for each tooltip, or some does have custom values. So I think it needs to be extracted, but with some of the original props there for us to overwrite. And in terms of different charts we are plotting on top, I think it also depends on how much are we sharing in our project. Because in this demo, I have to kind of duplicate the rainfall area chart and the compound chart. But in reality, if we do it in our own project, we probably wouldn't do 3 anyway. We probably would only do 1. So in terms of whether it's worth sharing, is just depends on how much of this type of chart are we creating. So yes, this workshop is a rough demo, basically to explain the different parts of the charts, more than to explain how to write React pretty React code. Yeah.
All right. Anyone else? Anyone remembers what they wanted to ask?
Sorry. Yeah, what's your testing approach for the charts?
Sorry, what approach?
Testing approach.
Oh, testing approach.
Yep.
Oh, that can go very detailed and deep, and can also go like simple. I think it depends on how strict you want to test it. So if you want to make sure you never make mistakes, I think you can go as complicated as UI testing, which will be used libraries like Percy or Chromatics to actually render the image and let your designers do your QA. So there are tools to pre-render different components, and you can actually send to your designer to do your GitHub PR on blocking. So this is what I say the most like complete kind of testing for this. And also, like if you can go very basic to do just a basic render shallow testing, which for my case it doesn't make sense, but it just makes sure your component doesn't break. And when we are actually doing complicated data formatting, it's worth unit testing the data to make sure the data structure is what we expected and what's the chart expected. Yeah, kind of.
Yes. Yeah. So I believe it's the first approach you talked about is more for like visual regression testing.
Yeah.
But I guess there's no need to test the third-party libraries. We just need to test the inputs and outputs, pretty much the inputs, to make sure the helpers and utils work as expected.
Yes.
I guess. Yep.
Totally correct. Yes, that's how I would do it. So if we are doing, for example, if this function is right by ourselves, we can potentially test it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Also, I realized that, yeah, I was safely typing whatever Faye says, and I was like, oh, it's very comfortable. You can type from your laptop screen to your main screen. Then I realized like how many people actually have more than one screen when they go to a workshop online. I don't know if many. And it would be a real struggle to pace to get to go after the presenter and to actually be able to do because I was like doing everything in time, but I think it's a little bit too much if you only have one screen. You're not able to really follow the workshop that quickly. You can only watch it.
Yeah. I feel this is a relatively simple code demo, and hopefully everyone can follow and do some exercise. So something I said I might mention. So this is another chart. Actually, I've been using it to plot some COVID data myself, just for fun. For the free version, you always have this logo, but it can actually plot some more complicated chart. First of all, this is not a commercial. It's just my personal preference. I'm not recommending buying. It's good to try as a hobby project. As you can see, there are also map data. We can try at home to have fun. And I think Recharts is a really good one as like free React library, very easy to learn. And we got like 12,000 stars on GitHub.
I think it's now 13,000. That's surprising. What happened?
14, yeah, quite popular. It's created by Alibaba's team for Ant Pay, I think. Maybe for Ant Pay. It's same company that created Ant Design and some other libraries.
So yeah, it's not going away. It makes sense to invest time into learning this library. Some libraries, they are relatively popular, but then eventually the support dries out, and then you're like, who's gonna take care of it in a few months? I don't know.
Lots of like relatively good libraries, they either put a watermark there or they just say you need to pay for this. Like Fusion Chart, Recharts, they are really good examples of popular chart libraries that ask for money.
Or they just stand outside your office like, where's my money?
Just a quick question. Have you compared this with D3 and its library that comes with for React?
Yes. Previously, I did actually do some like, I think last year I did some like really deep digging into how they wrote their code. But they regularly change. I'm not sure how much they change, but it's basically a wrapper on D3. You can even see how they like named their PRs is like really very clear layer on top of D3. And we all know that D3 is something not easy to learn. First of all, because the documentation is not structured well. And also it's like somewhere between JavaScript and the raw SVGs. You have to know a lot of SVG knowledge. Not have to, like kind of like better to know some SVG knowledge to write this way smoothly. Yet Recharts is a layer on top that wrap this way in a really understandable way, and also already align them with the normal types of charts we would plot. I think it's quite handy. And it's not very complicated over this way either.
Have you run any memory performance optimization or to check the memory allocation and things like that for this? What's your experience like that for using Recharts?
No, I didn't try do performance testing, but I did try the code analysis. So we plotted a tree map. It's not very small, like it's not definitely not a very small library, but I think for what it does, I think is I think a reasonable size. And so we've been using it for our projects, like production project, for 2 years, and it works well, never hit any performance issue. Yet when we use Chart.js, it hit really quick. Oh, for this one, by the way, is also free. So if we want to try canvas-based chart, is a good one to try. Just turn off animation when you release production.
Okay. Yeah, so I think the dependency for this is React. It's below the React version 6.5, so you can't really do React profiling on it, Recharts. Maybe, I don't know, maybe just now it will change.
Yeah, I think they do change regularly. Sometimes we do hit issues like some of the components they use out of date. I think previously get rid of some of the lifecycle functions relatively late.
Yep.
But now the problem seems to be fixed, at least for the lifecycle functions. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Next.
So the question there, is there anything similar in Angular? I'm not really, haven't been touching Angular in a while. I noticed that AM charts that Faye mentioned, the paid ones, they do support Angular because they built for just in normal JavaScript, not tied to any specific framework initially in its core. So yeah, I don't really know anything.
Yeah, mchart is just normal JavaScript. Like it's just normal like ES6 or TypeScript modules. And
well, you can always write your own wrapper and
yeah, you can write your own
around D3 or Angular.
Yeah, there are some
I'm just joking. I'm pretty sure there must be something, but sorry, not aware.
Yeah.
All right, most of the things are covered, and we'll produce a recorded version and put it in a meetup comment, I guess.
So I'll post the Figma link, and I'll give like a pre-finished version. So you can always visit this one to see my progress. And you can always go to this one. The home exercise one will be exactly the same as when I started. And I'll post a finish, like the previously finished version by me in the comment as well. And some link that's worth reading. Also, this is something we always say at the end of the workshops, is we encourage teaching in front-end workshops. So basically for this one, I did a like home hobby project, and then I take out some of the component inside and made it a workshop. I feel it's a really cool way to actually practice at home and share with everyone. So if you're bored at home, could do that.
Yeah, what?
Yeah, you want to add something?
Nope. I'm pretty much done here. Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks, Faye. That was really good.
All right. Yeah. Anyone wants to share their experience in different other workshops? Like, what would you really actually add to this workshop to improve its, maybe reduce the speed of the workshop? Maybe there's too much material or too little. Or did you want more chat about how your cat is misbehaving at home or anything like that? Your ceiling is leaking or anything? You have to wash dishes? No? No usual chat?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, Alison. I think because you came in a little bit late, we did say we're going to more focus on code demo instead of like have everyone follow the progress. And also we can make this workshop a little bit shorter for everyone to not stress everyone.
Yeah, I really miss going for coffees with everyone during meetup breaks.
Yeah, so hopefully we can keep this up, like with like different people trying to teach together, and feel free to message me or Woba privately to ask for topics. Yeah, we're happy to do that.
All right. Okay, I guess we'll wrap up.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. And
Thanks for coming.
Hopefully see you next time, one of the other workshops.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. See you.
Bye.